Hey there, Nick Jatakis here. In this video, we're going to go over a tool that I just open sourced called Plutus, which is a command line income and expense tracking tool. You can use it for help with budgeting, as well as getting your numbers in order to file taxes. Now, you might be thinking, Nick, does the world really need another budgeting or finance tool? And I think the answer is yes. So I've been tracking my personal and business expenses now for about 10 years. And I don't know, I always feel like I need to make some type of compromise. Maybe the program opens up a little bit too slowly, or generating reports is a little bit tricky. It's only something you do maybe once per quarter, but you have to go like 8 menu items deep. So it feels like you have to relearn the tool every time you use it. Or maybe, adding in some items is very cumbersome and you're not quite sure if your items are input correctly. Or, maybe when it comes to organizing your finances, basically different categories, maybe that's really hard to change later, but over time, you want to make improvements like that. So these are some of the reasons why I developed this tool. And in this video, we're going to spend a minute or two going over the vision, basically the DNA of the project, but we're going to also jump into a terminal and try things out, demo all the functionality, see how it works from ground zero. So yeah, with that said, we're going to go over a couple little paragraphs here, nothing crazy, maybe a minute or two, and go from there. By the way, I will mention that it is a zero dependency Python script, so there's no package managers required. You basically just need to curl down one file and you're good to go. There actually are importers from other tools here that you can use as well. Of course, you will need to download those individual importers if you want to use them. So yeah, let's just say that you just want to keep track of your income from a couple of different sources. Maybe you want to separate your business and personal expenses here and keep tabs on how much you paid in taxes. Maybe you're not especially interested in, double entry bookkeeping for balancing funds between accounts. You just want to get your numbers and move on with life. You also want little to no complexity with the freedom to add as little or as much detail as you want. If you want to track every last personal expense down to the penny with a very deeply nested categories, you can do that. Or if you just want to skip that and optimize for business expenses and income, you can do that too. It also should be really, really painless to refactor how your items are categorized. Also, maybe you want to answer questions like, how much did I spend on personal expenses this month? Or how much income did I generate and from where? Or how much did I spend on any of my businesses? Or what's my business's taxable income? Basically, your income minus business expenses minus tax deductions here. Or maybe now it's time to file quarterly taxes if you live in the US and you have your own business here. What numbers do I need to give to my accountant or figure out for myself? Or now it's time to officially file taxes here. How can I be sure my numbers are accurate? Also, you're busy, right? You just want to see these results in about 1 second with a quick way to filter and sort and slice and dice this stuff by, multiple different ways here. And you don't want to spend time tinkering with a whole bunch of different options, but those options are there if you want to use them. Also, maybe you're paranoid about incorrect data, so you want explicit feedback to help you validate and confirm that each item being reported on was inputted correctly. Also, you enjoy the command line, right? And the philosophy of it's just text. You just want to deal with text input that produces text output. And at the same time, if it does come up, you want a data format that an accountant is okay with, such as a CSV file. It's also nice to have a single CSV file in case you want to do some, visual analysis in some spreadsheet tool. Also, by the way, as an aside, I've actually worked with a couple of different accountants. None of them asked for a CSV or any formal export from a different tool. They just wanted my income and business expenses in different categories, and Plutus can do that by itself. So if any of the above resonates with you, I really encourage you to give it a try. I've actually imported 9 years worth of data from GNU Cache, and everything lines up to the penny here. It also generates reports for over 12,000 items in about 100 milliseconds on my machine that was built in 2014. There's also a demo feature to try it out with no time investment on your part. You basically just run command here. We're going to run it in a second or two here. But also this doubles as a nice way to generate test data because correctness and accuracy is a major concern for a tool like this. As for not using other tools, we kind of covered this before here, but one piece of new information here is, I certainly don't want to link my bank account or provide financial details to a SaaS company. Also, I don't know, something just flipped in my brain here. Ultimately, I'm kind of done making compromises on tools that I use on a regular basis. So this is what I came up with after 2 weekends of development based on nearly a decade of finance tracking. When I say 2 weekends, I don't know, the fire was there. I was waking up at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning, coding for 12 to 14 hours with a couple little breaks here. And this is the result of that. And I'm really happy to share it with you here. So yeah, let's jump into terminal here and just see how things go. I will mention here too, though, by the way, the readme file has a whole bunch of details. Installation wise, you just curl down a script here. Right now it's using sudo because it will curl things down to use a local bin, but you can feel free to put that in a different path here. And you don't need sudo at all. So I've already run this here. So yeah, let's go to the the terminal and try things out. So very first thing we'll need to do here is just run Plutus here with no command line arguments or whatever, and it will welcome you to the script. So welcome to Plutus. The first step is applying a new profile, and a profile is basically that single CSV file that's associated with the commands that you're going to run. You can technically have multiple profiles. That's why it's named a profile here. But, let's say that you're a sole proprietor. Maybe you're tracking your income and expenses from a couple of different sources. I would suggest using one profile here. But, if you want complete separation between multiple businesses, or maybe you have, a couple of different businesses with different currencies, you can absolutely have different profiles here. It's really easy to change this stuff and override those as needed here. So by default, though, it is going to create a profile in this path here. Of course, your username is going to be different. It'll make this directory if it exists. This is just a directory structure I prefer, but of course you can just customize this to be whatever you want. If you're happy with the defaults, though, you can just hit enter and it's going to set things up successfully here. Now, it's also going to let you know a couple files of interest here and getting started tips. So there is a config file associated with Plutus here. It's going to be in your user's config directory, .config, and there it is. We're going to go and check that out a little bit later in the video here. Also, just let you know that your default profile path is going to be whatever you input here. So basically, if you run any command, it's going to use this profile by default. Also, for getting started, you can import things from GNU Cache. Maybe I'll write some other importers later from different bank CSVs. I just don't want to arbitrarily write a whole bunch of different importers that I don't use. But yeah, feel free to open up a GitHub issue if you have a really good case for another one. But a real interesting takeaway there, it's just text, right? So you don't even need this tool to do anything extra to import stuff. Like that GNU Cache importer is not part of the main script. It's its own standalone thing. But yeah, besides importing, you can just start adding your items in, or you can just run this demo account or demo command here to start playing around with some temporary data. So this will actually create a temporary profile in this path over here, because yeah, it's kind of nice just to play around with stuff, maybe see how things are, rather than try to explain everything with words. So let's actually just go ahead here and run this demo init command here. So I'll just run demo init, just basically the same command that I mentioned over here. And now it's going to give you some helpful text on how to use this profile and maybe where to go next here. So as mentioned previously, when we created our profile before, the default one, it's going to use that. But now we need to override that profile and use something different. So we have a couple of different examples of how to do that, right? You can just add this environment variable to every command that you run, and that would work just fine. But you can also export it to your current shell, right? For example, we are in a shell right now. So if I were to export this command, then every command that I run with Plutus is going to use this profile by default. And if I were to open up a new terminal tab or a session or whatever, then this would get reset. But you can also just do unset and then on that environment variable, and then maybe also clean up the demo data if you want when you're done playing around with the demo. So let's just do this here. So I will grab that, and then yeah, we'll just export that one. And then the next step here is kind of just to play around with the tool. So let's see how it goes here. And by the way, it does mention here, you can always run these commands to get some information. Let's deal with that a little bit later. But yeah, one of the first commands here that we can run is just show. And I should probably zoom out a little bit more because things are wrapping to multiple lines because I'm zoomed in so much for the video. But yeah, what show is going to do is basically it's going to, look at your profile CSV file and then basically output what you see here, right? We can see a couple of different columns here. We have the date, category, amount, total, method, notes, etc. And yeah, this is a time sorted output that we see here. The oldest stuff is on top, newest stuff is on the bottom. We can sort things however we want here. But before we get into the gory details of playing around with different things, let's just go over maybe some of these columns that we see on the screen here. So this is an auto-incremented ID. This is actually not saved to your CSV file. It's dynamically calculated every time you run the show command here, or other commands as well. Then we have the date. The date is going to be in your CSV file, and it's just year dash month dash day, right? And then we also have categories. Categories are a way for you to arbitrarily, organize your finances here, and you just break them up with a colon here. You can see I have a couple of different demo ones created here. We have the idea of personal expenses, and then we have different types of that. Then we also have different types of income, and then also business expenses, and then tax refunds, etc. This is up to you. This is just a demo data here. You can organize this or deeply nest this or not nest this, however you'd like. Then we also have the amount here. Right now it's being displayed as USD. So I will say a heads up here. If you are in other areas of the world, it will read your system's locale by default here. So if you happen to live somewhere in Europe that, supports having euros or whatever, that would be formatted like that. We're going to see how that works a little bit later when I'll start modifying my locale to show that. Then we also have this idea of a total. This is actually a dynamically calculated column here. This is not included in your CSV file. But yeah, in this case, it just keeps a running tally of all things here to the bottom. bottom. For example, we have $20.01 here, and then the next one is 32. And if you add this up, that is going to be 52.01. So then, it just runs this all the way down to the bottom here. Then we have this idea of a method. This is basically your payment method. Now, over the years, I found it to be very helpful to have this associated with each transaction or each item that you see here, because when it comes to really verifying your numbers later, it's really good to go back to the source of where this number came from. And in this case, this could be whatever. It could be Venmo, or maybe it's a bank ACH, or maybe it's a specific credit card, or PayPal, or Stripe, or Zelle, or whatever payment, processor that happened to be used, or it could be cash as well. But yeah, like for example, if I wanted to, double check this train trip to New York City here for $32, I know this is some credit card or whatever, so I can just go to my bank CSV file export and just make sure that, okay, yep, that really happened on February 28th, and it was really $32. And, I can go and verify that information really quickly, and then make sure that it's good here. So I kind of like having that method there. And then notes are kind of just arbitrary notes about the transaction. It could be empty, it can be a single word, it can be a sentence, it could be whatever you want. And keep in mind, we're going to go over some other filtering abilities here. So, maybe you can come up with your own system for like tagging stuff, but yeah, it's basically whatever string that you want there. Now, speaking of filtering, yeah, let's start playing around a little bit with some more advanced stuff, because right now this just took everything from your CSV file and parsed it. But let's say that maybe you just want to show things from, 2024 or 2025. So you can just type in something like 2024. I'm choosing that one because a little bit less data, so it all fits nicely on the screen here. But this is just a regular expression. It's not doing anything too crazy or anything fancy here. I will say there are some conveniences put in if you put exactly a date or something that resembles a range of dates. For example, there is another convenience here where you can just put in a specific quarter after the date like this. And this will actually just show you things from this specific quarter. Now, it's interesting. Actually, let me do this one with 2025 because there's a little bit more data, I think. Yeah, so this is actually US tax quarters. So those quarters are a little bit different than calendar quarters, right? So a calendar quarter is basically every 3 months, right? January, February, March, blah, 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 blah. But a tax quarter in the US, at least, it's broken up a little bit differently. So like Q4 is actually, September, October, November, December. Those are the payment periods of where you want to collect your income here to report on January 15th or usually around that time. This may actually turn into a config option later if those quarters end up being different. So yeah, if you have a different use case from a different area of the world, feel free to open up a GitHub issue. But the syntax for this would be the same. Just under the hood, it expands out to those 4 months here. I will mention this. So if you put in something like a date, like anything that resembles 4 digits or one of these convenience things, then it will actually anchor this to a regular expression like this. So this is not going to produce any different output than what we saw before because there is no false positives. But, that's basically what we're protecting against. Because imagine this. Imagine you just put in something like 2025. Well, the beginning of the CSV file actually starts with this date here. So it's really nice to anchor that at the start of the line because you can imagine, in this case, I don't think there's any examples of it, but you can imagine where the amount might actually be something like $2,000, $2025 basically. And you don't want to match something from 2024 that happens to have an amount, or maybe you have a note that's in there. So yeah, just as a convenience here, it will anchor this to this, which is quite useful. Now, maybe it wouldn't hurt at this point just to show what the raw items look like here. So you can always just add the -- raw flag at any time, and it will show you exactly what's stored on disk here for your CSV file. You can see the format here. And I guess it is worth pointing out a couple of things here. So notice here that, the dates are not quoted. The amounts are also not quoted. The amounts are also in basically a float format that supports the idea of, 2 decimal points here as well. That's how that is set up here. And then also like things that are strings are quoted even if they technically don't need it, right? With a CSV file, you don't really need quotes if you have something like one word. My thought process here is, let's make things consistent, like out of the box from the beginning. If you have something like 1 word or 2 words, just quote them all the time. And then in this case here too, like for example, this Freedom Card one for the groceries, there is no notes at all. That technically doesn't need any empty quotes here as well. And by the way, the raw command here will respect your filtering. For example, if we go and show everything, then it's going to show everything. But yeah, cool. Okay, so let's go and expand on, kind of what we were playing with before. So let's go back to just 2024, a little bit less data here. This is actually, time sorted, but let's say that you want to sort things by category or something like that. So you can just do category like this, and that is going to sort things alphabetically. You can see now business expenses are up top instead of near the middle over here. And if you just want to flip that, you can also just put a negative sign at the end. And now it's going to put personal expenses here up top. It's basically just reversing that list. And you can sort things on many different columns. For example, maybe you want to sort things by the amount. You can totally do that. And then you can also flip it as well. You can see the amounts, most expensive stuff on the bottom, and now it's flipped. So your biggest business expenses there are on the bottom. And then you can also, do it on things like the method and the notes and stuff like that. I'm not going to show all of them, but sure, if you want to sort them by method, you can do that. Let's go with a little bit more data maybe. So maybe let's remove the filter. And there we go. We can see things are nicely sorted by the method here too. Now, this is really good just for seeing your individual transactions. But, now you might be thinking like, okay, that's cool. But what about, I just want to see all of my business expenses or all of my income, or just show me some aggregated stats about everything, how much was there, how many items, etc. So we can do this. So we can just do a summary now on everything, let's say. And it is going to get all the different unique categories that you have, and then it's going to tally up all the number of items that you have. For example, there was 2 of them here for affiliates here. It's going to add those numbers together, and that's how you get this amount. And then this total column is the same as before. It's just going to keep a running total of things that we see here. And then also we have this other second total, which is basically just a running total of all the different items. So now you can be like, oh, cool, I had exactly, 32 specific items across all of my categories here. And of course, that's just an auto incremented ID here, also dynamically calculated. We mentioned that before. But yeah, this is pretty cool. And, similar to sort, you can actually bucket these things by different columns as well. For example, instead of doing it by category, which is the default, by the way, this is the same thing as just what we just ran, you can actually do it by something like, I don't know, maybe you want to do payment method. So now it's going to get all your different payment methods here and tally those up. So it kind of gives you a way to kind of slice and dice your data and view it in ways that make sense for you to extract out whatever information that you want. For example, it could be kind of interesting maybe to see dates, right? How many items were sold on specific dates. Now you can look at this data and be like, oh, interesting. Well, I'm seeing a spike near like the end of the year in my sales. That's pretty good. But now you can get this information very quickly from the command line here, which is pretty nice. Okay. So by the way, I will mention here too that, if you just run --help, it will let you know all the different column or all the different flags that you can type here. We've been using the long name flags, but of course the short ones as well. And it looks like there's another one that I almost forgot here, which is summary with items. So let's try that one out. So if we just do summary like this, we get this. Let me actually just filter this to be 2024, so it's a little bit less data. And then, yep, here we go. So let's see what summary with items does. So that is going to actually do the same thing that we just saw before, where it is going to grab, this aggregated stats here, but it's also going to list all the items that are associated with any of the things returned here. So we can see there's actually been 8 items returned here, and we can see the total is 8. And if you were to count up, all this stuff, it all lines up here. Now you can just see the individual items. It's kind of nice here too to see the very bottom of the total. You can see there's like, negative 1,777. You can see it matches here too, because, these running totals are based off the same data here. And, let's say that you wanted to just filter this to business expenses or something like that. You can totally do that. You can do business expenses here. And then, of course, well, not of course, but we are going to anchor it here with the colon here because colons can only exist in categories. So that's going to show you just your business expenses here, which is pretty nice. You can also do this as well on maybe 2025. Like let's say you just wanted to get some expenses there just for that specific year. You can do that. And then also, we can combine both of those to get more interesting stats out of things. For example, maybe we have, 2025 dash because, the dash is going to exist in any date there. And then, we just want to be more specific in our regex. Then we can do business expenses here. And then we can do income. Actually, no, let's do it like this. So it's going to be an or income. And then, we put this outside of here because it's going to apply to either of these. So this is just regular expression syntax, right? To basically say line starts with 2025 dash, and then it's or going to be either business expense or income. And then there's going to be the colon here. And let's close out that quote here. Feel like I probably messed something up because, oh yeah, duh, it's just a regular expression. You need to put the dot star here because you want any characters, any amount of any characters. There we go, silly me. But here we go, we can see the output here for just 2025, business expenses and income. And this is something you may want to give to your accountant or use to be like, hey, by the way, when I looked at this stuff, here's all my business expenses, here's all the income, and here's the amount that we have here. So yeah, this is a nice way to kind of just like filter your things, get some useful information out of there. So that's the basics on seeing your data, but maybe now let's go over some configuration options that you can do and maybe see some demonstrations of things working with different locales, because there are a couple of things, even, unrelated to different currency formats and whatever. But here you can see that the negative amounts are stored with a negative sign here or displayed with a negative sign. But, if you've ever worked with other financing tools or accounting, it's pretty common to have your negatives wrapped in parentheses instead of actually using a negative sign. So there are a couple of different config values to tweak to change some of the stuff here, or maybe you don't want any formatting at all. You can totally do that as well. So there is a command that we can run here, which is going to just show us our config file. This is the one that was produced when we first started the program here. And there's some default values are set up here as well. Your default profile is going to be different based on whatever you configured it to. But in this case, there's also a nice little convenience where you can just do edit, which is going to pop open this file in your configured code editor. Mine happens to be Vim. Yours might be different. It doesn't really matter. It will launch the correct one. And then here we can actually, play around with some of the formatting numbers. Now, in this case, what I actually want to do though is probably just split this tab here and maybe just manually run a Vim command just to change that config file directly. So if we go to here, there is the config, same thing. But here, let's go back up here and I don't know, see the summary again for 2024. Cool. Let's just say that we don't want any formatting. So we can just change our config here to be like, okay, well now there's not going to be any formatting. And there we go. We can see there's no currency sign, there's no commas, everything is just straight from the CSV file basically. And then, okay, now let's say you want to play around with some things where it's like, well, maybe you do want formatting, but you don't want negative signs there. So you can just say format negatives with parentheses. Let's set that to true because it was false a second ago. Let me clear that so we have some room. And then if we do this, now you can see all the different negatives are in parentheses here. You can see all the positives are like that. If you have that preference, you can totally do that if you'd like. Maybe your accountant prefers that, or maybe you do. It's very easy to change these things around. Now, there's a couple of other settings here too. We're going to get to these once we start going over the linter, but that is that for now. So let's close this. Maybe I'll make this a little bit smaller, whatever. And then, yeah, let's start playing around a little bit with some locales here. So on my system right now, it defaults to, I guess, English US, but you can change this or it'll just work out of the box for you depending on where you live and what your locale is set. But here, let's just say I'm just going to arbitrarily set mine to something different. So let's go with, I don't know, ENGB, I think it is for Great Britain here. So we can look at things in pounds. So if we do this, then we should, assuming my syntax is correct. Is it a dot here? I always forget. I think it is a dot. Yeah, here we can see it's now using the pound symbol here. And, if you have a different currency for a different country, like for example, let's go to Greece, and then we can see here the euros are on the end here. That's just the formatting of this. And this tool is going to display this stuff no matter what it is. If you have any other currency formatting syntax or whatever that occurs, it's just going to display it here. And that will work with the parentheses around the negatives too. It doesn't really matter. It's just nicely going to work out of the box. Now, I will mention this. So I am from the US, and in the actual CSV file, it's always stored as basically a float, but to two decimal places, right? Those decimal places, will that be confusing for other folks who live in different areas of the world? Like, is it like trying to convert like miles and kilometers in your brain? I don't know. My thought process was, I think saving it at the source in one format is very similar to like saving dates in a database as like a UTC time, but then like the front end displays it in whatever, local currency or, date formatting that you want. I kind of went with the same philosophy there, but if you think different, feel free to open up an issue on GitHub and yeah, maybe we'll work things out where things can be saved in whatever locale that you're using instead. So that really handles kind of displaying data, looking at existing data that was there. But now let's talk a little bit about inserting new data. And you have a couple of different ways to do this one. So you can do something just like Plutus edit here, and that is going to open up your CSV file directly in your configured code editor. This is one way to do it. There's another way to do it, like an interactive insert mode, which we're going to go over next. But, what I like to do once in a while is, let's say I'm going to be adding a new item, I'll just like copy this and maybe make a couple of new lines here because it's kind of weird, like in my mind, and I'm not a surgeon, but it's like, if you ever were to think about surgery, it's like, they kind of like just expose the area that's open and then everything else is kind of covered up with like that blue gown or whatever. So I kind of just like making a whole bunch of spaces here just so I know like, hey, that's my pristine data here. I'm operating on just this. This is going to be the new thing added. So maybe here, let's go and, I don't know, change this date to be something like whatever it is today. So it's kind of funny because the demo data here generates data from the future, like depending on when you're watching this video. So like right now it's in February, but it generated stuff in 2025 in the future. So yeah, let's just pop in some date here that's earlier than this here. And I don't know, let's just say, I don't know, it's maybe $1,000, let's say, just so it's easier to find. Cool. And then we'll just put, I don't know, the word demo in here. Fine. You can also, add multiple items at once too, of course, if you wanted to. But let's just do one for now. I'm actually going to leave the empty lines in here. I'm going to leave this thing unsorted and just do it like this and save the file. And now if we actually run this other command here, which is edit sort, so this will actually kind of fix your file it will sort things. It's also going to remove all of the empty new lines. This tool tries really hard not to touch your CSV file, but when it does, it's usually with very explicit commands like edit or insert or something that sounds like it's going to be modifying the file. But in this case, what it will do is if it did find that it needed to make a modification, such as sorting something, it was like, hey, by the way, look, I saw this thing all the way on the bottom of the file. It's a little bit out of date, so I'm going to sort this thing for you by date. I'm going to pop it up over here, and then you can see the little diff here, and you can see like, oh, cool, here's a nice way to fact check that the tool input this thing in the correct spot, because you can look at these two dates around it and be like, oh yeah, so the 10th is in between the 5th and the 28th. Everything is good to go here. So yeah, and now if we actually were to go and take a look here at the file again, we would see we can just do a search for 1,000. There it is nicely in its spot that it needs to be. There's a demo one. And then also you can see down here, those empty spaces were removed. Basically, if there's any empty spaces for any command that you run, it will just ignore empty new lines like that. So that's pretty nice. But let's say that you want to, and by the way, I will mention here too, sometimes it's kind of nice just to be able to open up your code editor, pop open a new line, and then duplicate a couple different things, because maybe you're putting in some back items from a previous date. I don't know. I find that workflow to be pretty quick, but there is another way to also insert items as well. If I can actually exit Vim here. So let's go and do insert. So insert is going to interactively help you add items in a correct way. So the first thing it's going to do here is just basically ask you well, what category do you want to put this item into? And it's going to get all your different categories here and just put a little number. So here you can, put the number next to whatever category that you want to insert stuff into. For example, maybe you want to add some income from consulting. So you just put 8. Or let's say that you want to create a new category. You can just put in your category name here, and don't worry about putting the quotes or anything like that. It's going to do all the quoting for you automatically. So, but in this case, the common case is probably you have an existing category. You're going to add something to it. So let's do that. And then it's going to let you know what up to the latest 5 items for that category that you're inserting things into. Now, in this case, there's only 4 of them, so it only showed 4. But this kind of gives you, a little bit of a head start on hey, these are the last 4 items that I added for this category. Here's what they look like. And now you can kind of, just look at that as a reminder of how things were set up previously. And in this case, if you don't put in a date at all, it's going to just pick the date for today. So right now I'm recording this video on February 10th, so it's going to put that there. But you can also choose to put in a different date if you'd like. But let's just say that, maybe you put something in incorrectly by accident. Maybe you put in something like 99 instead of 09 or whatever, and then maybe let's just say the 10th or whatever. This is actually going to parse your information here and be like, hey, by the way, there's a date mismatch here. I'm going to warn you of that one. And actually, as soon as we go over inserting items here, after this command is done, we're going to go over the lint command, which is going to help you, validate your file and show you all sorts of different information if something is input incorrectly. But yeah, okay. So let's go back here and maybe just keep this one empty. We'll put it on, February 10th. Sure. Okay. And then, now we need to put in our amount unformatted up to 2 decimal places here. So for example, 1,000 would be input like this. So you can also, by the way, this is undocumented, but if you put in 100 with no decimal points here, it will just, make your life easier and use 100 ... Also, even if you wanted to put in something like 10,000 or whatever it happens to be, it will just strip out the comma for you just to make your life easier. And this will end up as 10,000.00 with no formatting at all. So I don't know. Yeah, let's go with 10,000 like this. And okay, it took it. And then the next thing is okay, well, what was the payment method? Same thing as a category. You can just pick it from the list here, or you can make a new one. So let's just go with, I don't know, maybe it's a bank ACH on this one because it was kind of a lot. So okay, let's go with that. And then here with the notes, you can just leave it empty or type in whatever notes that you want. This is my notes. Whatever. So you don't need to worry about the quotes. It's going to do it for you. So let's do it with some notes here and just see how it works here. And now here is your raw CSV line. It hasn't been added yet, but now's the time for you to kind of confirm things look good. Okay, that's a date that we chose. We wanted consulting. There's our, unformatted amount there. That looks good. The notes look good here. And you can always scroll back up here and check to make sure okay, that was category 8. Sure, that's the one that we wanted. And then here, if you hit enter or whatever, it's just not going to accept anything except Y or hitting Control C to cancel. So let's actually hit Y on this one. And what's interesting about this one is the way the insert command works is it is always going to add your item at the very bottom of the list. and then it's going to sort it. So funny enough, it ends up using the same like sort function as the other -- sort command that we saw when we used edit there. But yeah, in this case, that command doesn't really care that it was inserted this way. It just knows like, hey, by the way, I saw that you had a file. This thing was like not sorted, and now it is. But this is really cool. It kind of gives you a way to also again confirm that that item being inserted was inserted in the correct spot here. So there we go. And then also I will mention here too, let me just rerun this again. Sometimes you might just hit enter by accident, right? Just like spamming through a couple of different inputs. It's just going to keep repeating until you put in something. So, let's just do another example real quick here. I don't know, like maybe we'll put in another 8 here or whatever. This time, let's just say that we want to put in an item from a different date. I'm going to put one in that will put this at the bottom of the list instead of like in the middle. So let's do that. And then for the amount, whatever, we'll just put in, I don't know, $50, let's say. And then it's just going to be, I don't know, maybe it was Venmo this time. And then let's leave the notes empty. And now it's going to be like, yep, same thing. Do you want to confirm that? Yeah, that looks good. Let's do it. So in this case, it didn't preview any sort diff because nothing needed to be diffed there because it didn't sort anything that was different. So in this case, you can always just look at your things again. So you can just do a show here. Let's just show all. And then we can see, there's our new item here on the bottom, because we added it here on the last day. And, if we scrolled up here, we'd also find our one in the middle here. Yep, there it is. And yeah, there's our stuff. Actually, it was this one here. Cool. Okay, nice. So let's go and now play a little bit with the linter. So the linter is going to help you, verify that the items that you inserted or, basically the state of your CSV file is in good shape. So we can just run Plutus lint here. And, it adheres to the Unix philosophy, right? No news is good news. In this case, there's no linting errors. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to modify the actual file directly here on the bottom, instead of using the edit command here, because, I kind of want to play with the file, mess it up, and we'll see some lint outputs there. So yeah, let's just say that, I don't know, maybe like you put an A here by accident, and when I say you did it, I don't mean like you're going to do that, but these are things that could definitely happen here. So again, let's say that, maybe the wrong date was put in there for this, maybe also there's like 2 colons here instead of just 1, maybe in this case you have some income from DigitalOcean that's like accidentally put in as a negative, maybe on this demo one here, we just forgot to put quotes there. I don't know, let's see what else could be interesting. Well, you can like say maybe this was actually input twice. Maybe it's a duplicate. I don't know. Maybe this one here for this consulting one was all the way down, maybe out of order, right? The file isn't sorted correctly here. There's all sorts of other different ones that we can do as well, but I think that's going to give us enough now just to like demonstrate what happened here. So here, if we take a look here at the lint, or yeah, the lint output here, it is going to let us know exactly what went wrong and where and how. So in this case, it was like, hey, look, there's a date mismatch on line 3. Here's the actual raw item from your file. And yeah, okay, check it out. There's like the A there. And then there's another date mismatch on line 6. It's like, oh, well, yep, 97 is not a month there. And then, now it's like, well, the category is mismatched here. And there's a couple of different rules we're going to go over in a second showing like why that's invalid. And then also there's a warning. Let's skip that one for now. And then it's like the notes, whatever. We forgot the quotes here. And then, yeah, the sorting, now it is like kind of a big diff because we kind of screwed around with some of the dates here and is trying to sort that. It's like it's showing more things that are wrong because of other things as well. And then also there's like a uniqueness mismatch here as well, right? We have a duplicate of an item here. And now it's going to let you know like, hey, 6 linting errors occurred. And if we go back up here, there's actually 6. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then the sorting one or the uniqueness one here is 6. And here are all the different rules for the items. So, first it's going to also check to make sure that, the CSV headers are good. In this case, by the way, it's showing you all the linting rules here, not just the ones that failed for you. So you can look them all up if you want to. But yeah, it's just going to make sure the headers match here. And items have exactly 4 commas because commas are actually not a valid character in any of the fields here, even though technically, you can have like a comma inside of quotes. I just wanted to make life easier on the both of us and like not have to worry about any parsing errors because of a row comment. Yeah, there's going to be some white space mismatch here. It's going to strip any leading or trailing white spaces or, empty new lines, etc. And then when it comes to like the actual linting rules itself for different things like dates, categories, amounts, methods, notes, they all match a specific regular expression, and that regular expression is listed here. So this is actually, pulled from the actual regex variable. So it's like, it's always going to stay in sync with how it's actually implemented. And then, you can see with the dates too, that it also supports this idea of, different quarter numbers as well. But yeah, okay. So let's say you want to do fixing these things. That's where things get a little bit interesting, right? Because this data file is like your source of truth for your finances. And I don't think this tool should ever really go in here and start trying to fix those things programmatically. So it is going to be on you to fix the linting rules or linting validation errors there. So, I can just undo all the changes I did here and fix them. But yeah, the idea here is you'll definitely want to be the one who modifies these things to potentially address them, because not all of them are even addressable automatically. For example, going back up to this warning here, we have income is negative. So in this case, it's not any crazy AI tool. It's like literally an if condition. It's going to go back to that config item that we saw here. If you actually have a category that has the word income in it, it's case insensitive and does a parcel match, by the way. So like lowercase income will work, or if you had like a category incomes or whatever, like that will also match as well. But yeah, it's basically looking for negative income, and that probably in most cases might mean that it was input incorrectly, but there are definitely like legit use cases where you may have positive numbers and negative numbers in a certain category, like business expenses. Because you can imagine maybe you have a business expense where you buy something for $100, right? That's a line item that you have now in your CSV file. But then maybe like 2 weeks later, you return it. So you returned and you get back $100. So it's like, you have a positive amount for 100 in your business expense, or negative, sorry, because you spent that, but then you also get the positive back. So like you net zero in the end, but depending on how you decide to categorize your finances, you may choose to have both of those transactions inside the business expense that you bought and purchased from, or you may actually split them out so that one is considered like, like business refunds or whatever. That's really up to you. So, that's why this warning here is set as a warning and not an error, because you're going to have to use your discretion on whether or not this is actually like a legit thing. And also, when it comes to the uniqueness mismatch, this is also kind of an interesting one too, because, I even had cases like this come up in my own setup where it's like, someone did pay me at like 9:30 in the morning, but then, they wanted to have another session and it was like at 2 p.m. or whatever later in the afternoon for the same amount. So like I ended up having, well, in this case it's groceries or whatever, but like I ended up having 2 transactions for the same amount on the same day. And that's like a false positive, but not really. It's like I knew that was expected. So usually in those cases, what I like to do is I'll just put a note. I'll put a note on the end and be like, just a reminder for myself, right? To be like, hey, this isn't a duplicate, like client really paid me twice or whatever it is. And then suddenly it's not going to have a uniqueness mismatch problem anymore because now the notes are going to be different. So yeah, just something to be aware of here too, if you want. And also when it comes to unique mismatches here, you can also pass in this flag here to basically just not treat those as errors. So yeah, there's that. So let's go here. And I will mention here too, like there is another flag that you can just like omit warnings with too. So if you just did, I think it's no warnings. So here it won't show the warnings. Well, I already fixed all the errors, but yeah, anyways, you can always do lint -- help and it's going to show everything. But yeah, no warnings just won't show the warnings at all there. So that was handling that. But now let's go back to that, income and expense thing. So if we go here and take a look at our config file, then we have this like lint income and expense words. And, basically, income is anything that basically has the word income or a refund in it here. And then also, expense words are just expense. Now, I don't speak multiple language, right? I'm only using this tool on a US system here, but I understand that, folks might be using this tool from different countries where, maybe your category name is not going to be the English word income or maybe refund or expense. So yeah, you can just go into your config file here and, you can just change these to be whatever words that you want. These are just comma separated words. It will like strip white space and try to help you out there too. Now, I will mention here too, what's kind of interesting, I suppose, is that if you were to accidentally like remove this from your config file and then run any command here, then it will try to help you out to understand what went wrong. So here it's like, hey, by the way, here's a config file. It's missing these 2 fields here. And this could have happened from a couple of different reasons. You may actually encounter this due to nothing that you did wrong here, but let's say that you just upgraded to a newer version of Plutus here, and maybe I introduced a new setting here into the tool and you don't have it yet. So, any command that you run, this is basically a validation that runs for any command at the very start. It will just make sure that your config file is always up to date with the latest settings here. So, if they're missing, then you can just add them. And then, yeah, it also just shows you down here, by the way. Also, it protects against maybe you accidentally, deleted the line by accident, whatever, things happen here. But it will print out the default state of the config file here. Of course, like this path is your input that you put. So it doesn't know that before, you know what I mean? So it's like if the config file doesn't exist, it doesn't know what to put here. So that's only an example, but all the other ones are just like, what you see is what you get. And then if you want to customize these later, you can of course change these to be whatever you want. It's not going to throw any warnings based on the values. It just makes sure that the actual setting exists. So yeah, cool. Okay. Now you might be thinking though, we kind of talked a lot for a bit, and we've only seen things with like a pretty small amount of data. And by the way, I want to mention this too. You can always just run the help here to see all the different commands that you can run. So we played around with show and insert and edit and lint and info. Oh, we didn't go over info yet. Info is sort of interesting. And of course, there's version as well. But yeah, let's go over info. And info is going to just dump out all sorts of information, and you can also choose what information that you want. So in this case, if you do no arguments, then it is going to show you everything. And what this will do though is kind of give you, some tips and pointers and examples on certain things. This will run, it's not going to write anything to disk, but here it basically just explains like information, like what is a category, used to help filter your items here. And then you can split categories into subcategories with a colon character. You can do all sorts of different things here. It lets you know some of the rules around certain categories that you can and cannot have, or certain different characters, I should say. Here it kind of just gives you a dump of a whole bunch of different categories that you can use as inspiration. You don't have to use these, but it might be an interesting starting point if you're coming at this from ground zero. So this is about 10 years worth of finance data. Talking to my accountant, he kind of likes these things in this category, but of course, your preferences, it could be different, right? You can go way less, you can go way more. It's really up to you. And then when it comes to the items themselves, right? Here, it shows the raw format of things. It kind of just explains all the details and different rules of all the different things. We kind of went over some of this stuff with the linting rules or whatever, but this kind of, just makes it a little bit more human readable, I suppose, not like looking at regular expressions. Kind of just lets you know like what things are purposed for and like how they operate in terms of limitations or restrictions on certain things here. And then we also have the linting rules here. At any point in time, you can just look at these validation rules for the linting. And then, yeah, you can also just like, if you just, for whatever reason, just wanted to look at categories, you can just do categories here and it won't output everything. It'll just output the thing that you want. And then if you just wanted to, look at both of those, you can totally do that. In the future, maybe there'll be more information items here presented. Just an idea. So yeah, let's go back to that help menu here. And then there is one more thing to go over around demo. So this is what I was gonna mention before. So, we were taking a look here at this and the summary, then, there's only 35 items here, which is not a whole lot. So you might be thinking like, well, this is cool. Like the tool seems to run pretty fast when there's only 30 items. We can also just like time that right in our shell. And it looks like it's running in about 60 milliseconds here, which is pretty nice. But like what happens when you have 1,000 items or 10,000 items or 100,000 items or whatever items that you might have that could be a lot? And the tool actually has a way for you to benchmark stuff, because I find performance to be a feature, right? It needs to run fast. It needs to run good enough. So here we can run actually a demo init and we can do benchmarks. And by the way, this is like a neat quality of life thing with argparse and Python, just a super aside on gory details. It will actually support both init benchmarks and init benchmark and this and this and this and this. As long as the flag isn't ambiguous, then it will take it. So I found myself typing like init benchmarks with an S a couple of times. So I changed the raw command to actually support that. So even if you type in init benchmark, it will work. But here, let's run this and see what happens. So this is going to allow you to benchmark things with different amounts of items and see how fast they run on your machine. So it's going to do 1,000 items, 10,000 items, and 100,000. And it's going to give you some stats around how long each thing took. Like the generation time isn't really important, right? That's just like generating fake data. It wrote this file out in whatever, some amount of milliseconds. Also not that important, but kind of, neat to have from a technical perspective. This is the important one. So this one is letting you know how long it took to actually do like a summary on N number of items here. So you can see it took about 60 milliseconds. That's what we saw before in the terminal at time. It's 100 milliseconds for 10,000 items, and then maybe 600 milliseconds on 100,000. And this is on my machine from 2014. So, it's like almost 11 years old. So yours is probably going to be a lot faster. But when it comes to the items here, like 100,000 would be so much. I have 12,000 items after about 10 years of finance tracking. And even then, like, I feel like I made a mistake in the earlier years where I put individual items for like individual course sales. So like my number would actually be substantially lower if I didn't do that. And if you think about it like this, like let's say you had like a subscription, right? A yearly one that you're paying every month. That's only going to be 12 items for 1 year. So if you had like a couple of different subscriptions per month for the year, then what are we talking, like a couple of dozen items for the whole year? How many times do you go to like the grocery store, whatever? Like maybe conceivable that you only have maybe a couple hundred items, maybe like 1,000 or something at the absolute max. I'm not going to say absolute max, but you know, it's going to be very, very hard to get to something like 100,000. And even then, like 600 milliseconds is pretty fast on a 10-year-old plus machine, right? And by the way, if you didn't like, I'm not saying you're like accusing me of like lying about these numbers, like you can always just run the time command directly in your shell. And this is actually a pretty interesting example here where, you know, you can just supply a profile and just use that directly. So, you know, this init benchmarks command actually generated a couple of different temp files with different items here, and then we can go and actually show them, by the way, if you wanted to see them. But yeah, here, you know, let's just run, I don't know, the time one on the biggest one. Cool, okay, and then let's just run that, and then we can see the time command, yeah, it's about 600 milliseconds, right? It should line up with this number, basically. You know, it's not going to like factor in this stuff here, but it's going to factor in, just in this case, showing the summary. Now, you might be thinking like, well, you know, you're not showing, like you're not printing these items out to the terminal, so maybe, you know, is that making it a lot faster? And not really. So in this case, the summary is only printing what, like 20 lines or whatever it happens to be. We can actually see what this is and time it as well. Yep, you can see it's only, you know, outputting 40 lines of input or output there. And you can see it's about 600 milliseconds. It's about roughly the same as this one. You know, there's some variance there as well. But you can see the numbers are getting crazy now because, yeah, there's 100,000 items. Now, you might be thinking like, well, you know, if you wanted to go crazy and, you know, output 100,000 items to the terminal, yeah, you know what? That is going to take, on my machine at least, because it's very CPU bound. Because if you think about it, like, you know, even then it only took 5 seconds to do it. And yeah, it's extremely CPU bound because, I mean, think it needs to load 100,000 items from the CSV file, and then it also needs to sort them, and then it also needs to do some parsing and like other things and stuff. Like, yeah, so it's like holding those things in memory, flipping them around, doing whatever it needs to do, and then outputting it. So 5 seconds for 100,000 items being output is not that bad. You know, on a modern machine now, it's probably going to be maybe a third of that time. But in any case, how many times are you going to be outputting 100,000 items at once, right? You're not going to like read that individually, probably, most likely, but it's there. And I feel like the performance is okay enough. And yeah, I generated some fake data here all the way through around like fake notes and stuff. Okay, cool. So I believe that is going to be it for the demo. Let me just jump back to the README file real quick. We're not going to go over anything really. I just want to skim through it, make sure I didn't forget anything really important. But yeah, you know, you can always go back to the README file. There's like list of commands and flags to check out here. Kind of gives you some filtering tips that we kind of went over. So moving on here, yep, we went over, you know, editing things. You can do it either in your editor or maybe you can just do the insert commands here. There's a couple different environment variables that you can set here. We kind of went over the profile one. Technically, you can also customize the config path here, but you know, if you do that, then you will need to define where that custom config is. So you'll either need to export this to your current shell, maybe put it in your RC file, you know, maybe run every command with it. And by the way, I will mention here too, it does use the .config in your home directory as a default, but it will respect your XDG config home if you're on a Linux system there. And then also, yeah, there's more documentation here about the config items themselves, and then also more documentation on just basically the CSV file format, as well as dynamic headers here, and, you know, the items itself. You know, there are importing tools here as well if you want to, you know, contribute some code back. There are a pretty extensive test suite that runs in GitHub Actions here on every PR commit here. You know, if you want to maybe donate to the project, because if it helps you save time or helps you file accurate taxes there, you know, that's up here in the sidebar here with, you know, GitHub's like sponsor thing, whatever. As for like trusting me, I don't know, I'm just a dude on the internet, been posting stuff for 20 years. Have a whole bunch of different blog posts and videos, blah, 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 blah. All the links there if you want to go and check it out. I will mention this though, just before closing here around importing. So if you go to the importers directory here, and I can't run this one on video because it will show my real GNU Cache items here. But yeah, this is going to walk you through how you can import things from GNU Cache if you want to move over there. And yeah, just on the topic of importers, I don't know, maybe in the future, there'll be some bank importers for the banks that I use there on CSVs. But again, proof of concept stuff like that could be hacked together in like 10 or 15 minutes using a couple command line tools. If something good comes from that, then yeah, I'll definitely put the script up here so you can check it out. If you want to contribute other importers, then feel free to open up an issue there. With that said, that's Plutus. So I really hope you like it. Hope you try it out. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below. I'll do my best to answer all of them. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.